Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Yet again, I am your host, Dwayne, and yet again, we have our wonderful co-host here, Kazar.
Hi, everyone.
Looking good this week, Kazar.
Thank you very much.
We're joined today by a very special guest, Deanna Stanley. Deanna started her career as an embedded programmer in the telecommunications industry and was a significant contributor to Northern California having no internet for 2 days back in the late 90s. I think we'll actually need to ask you about that one a little bit later. She now helps sponsor transition to Agile and DevOps and spends her days screaming, "It's the people, not the tools," which I agree with wholeheartedly. Deanna's love of her life is her dog, Grimble. Am I pronouncing that right? Grimble?
That is correct.
Which is why she's always covered in fur if you see her in real life. Deanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you invited me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show today, Deanna. Let's start things off with something that's quite dear to my heart, psychological safety. It's every time I chat with people who are like asking me, "What's your job?" I often tell them that my job as a security professional is to make people chill, get them to understand what's going on, understand the risk, not panic if there's an incident. It's just mostly shaking hands, getting to know people, getting them to feel comfortable chatting with me and helping me achieve better security outcomes. And that, of course, entails psychological safety. So looks like you're quite an expert on that. Can you walk us through what psychological safety is? What are the core tenets? How does that work?
Sure thing. Yeah. So psychological safety, it has reached almost mythical status in IT in the past decade or so. It's what enables a team to really bring their own authentic selves to the table and have constructive conflicts. You've all been in some sort of a team where everyone just does what they're told and they don't speak up, and maybe they'll complain about the leader behind his back, but you don't do anything in the team meetings. And you've also been in team meetings where everyone speaks up and you bounce ideas off of each other and you end up pulling out a much better product in the end. The difference between these two teams is the second team has psychological safety. These people feel comfortable speaking up and offering suggestions and collaborating to get the best solution. And that's really important. As Dwayne said, I do Agile and DevOps transformations for a living. And most of Agile and DevOps is a mindset. It's how teams work together. So if you don't have any sort of psychological safety, you're not going to get the best out of your teams, and you're not going to see all the magic goodness that comes with DevOps and Agile. I like to say, if you get DevOps and you don't change the way you think and the way you interact with people, you just get to the same failure at a slightly faster pace.
That's savage, but it's very true. It's really these are some really strong words. Well, all right. I would like to just mention one of my professors when I was in business school quite a long time ago. He was teaching psychology class for business majors, right? And he said that organizations are in the shape of those who lead them. And what he actually meant was that the organization's culture and workflows and people's behavior will often mimic the leader, the CEO, the team manager. And this is something that I have come to see in real life throughout my career. So how do you have psychological safety in a team, in an organization where the CEO or the leader does not, make the environment comfortable enough?
I know exactly what you mean, because I have worked at companies where the CEO was a arrogant autocrat and everyone just sort of said yes sir, and I've been at companies where the CEO has been a lot more friendly and welcoming. The fact of the matter is psychological safety is usually done at the team level, because at a corporate level, there's just too much going on to really build it. So the CEO can help set the foundation. He can make it easier or harder for the teams to develop psychological safety. You can still do it with a horrible CEO. In fact, one of the best teams I ever had, we worked really close together and shared everything because we were terrified of getting attention of management. And so we would go out of our way to help each other so that we didn't actually have to talk to this manager. So it's easier if you've got a CEO who is welcoming and allows for, inclusion and diversity, and is open and transparent and explains, even when it's bad, admits when it's bad and explains why it's bad and what they're going to do to fix it. This is important. But overall, psychological safety happens at the team level.
Oh, all right. Here's another fun question for you. Let's imagine a situation where you've got an organization that doesn't practice psychological safety at the org level, but you've got one team that is quite cohesive and they feel comfortable with each other, and we can say that they have that psychological safety element. Does that create a sort of us versus them situation, in your opinion?
I hope not, but it's probably what's going to happen is the team that doesn't have psychological safety is going to not perform as well as the team that does, and it's going to be recognized, and people are going to start calling them out. Why aren't you as good as team XYZ? What's your problem? Well, I can take it to Trevor and his team will get it done in 2 weeks. Why is it going to take you 3 months? So there's going to start to be some anger and jealousy that's coming up. It's not healthy, but it actually can start to help be a foundation of team cohesion, of we hate that team. At least now you've got something in common that you can start building on. Not the healthiest foundation, but it is a foundation.
Well, actually, that's one of the other reasons I want to bring you on here is to talk about foundations and how we can build these layers. Because it turns out you built a framework. You and your colleague, who originally was supposed to be on the call, unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. But you've come up with a framework that you talked about when I met you back at Agile and DevOps Days Des Moines. And we'll put the link down in the description of the show, but gotps.org. Can you just do a high-level overview of this framework and what the overarching goals are with it?
Sure thing. Having read a lot of information on psychological safety, a lot of people treat it as sort of an on-off switch. Either you've got it or you don't. And the things they would say to help build psychological safety to my coworker Kara and I felt inauthentic. They things like, get curious, ask questions. It's like, well, I've been in some psychologically unsafe teams, and if my boss started asking me questions, it would feel like an inquisition. So there was obviously something missing, and you have to build up the psychological safety. So we have 5 components to it. The first is the organizational safety that we were talking about at the corporate level. You don't need it, but it sure makes life better if you do. The next 4 stages are all based on the team, and they build on each other. So you begin with start with community safety, which is everybody on the team feels like they belong. You're not having somebody who isn't invited to all the meetings or who isn't given the same information as everyone. I recently joined a new team on my company, and the number of meetings that I haven't been invited to. Well, actually, I would like less meetings to be invited to, but someone will be like, "Oh, I talked to so and so in this meeting." It's like, I don't have an invite. What do you mean there's supposed to be, there was a meeting that I missed? So did I feel like I was part of the team? No. Were they dropping names that I didn't recognize? Yes. All of this starts to force me to not feel safe because I don't really feel like the team, because they've got knowledge I don't have, which leads us to the next level of safety, which has to do with learning and asking questions and feeling safe to grow your knowledge. So I'm going to go right back to the team that I'm on currently that I just recently joined. I'm happy to say that I can go and say, wait, you're talking about Gail. Who the heck is Gail? And they will sit down and explain to me, because most of the people on this team have been on this project for years. And I got brought in when a team member left. So I'm trying to climb this mountain of knowledge that everyone else has. And if I don't feel safe and comfortable actually asking questions, I'll never be able to perform all that well. And I'm never going to feel comfortable speaking up. And I'm going to be unhappy. And my lack of performance is going to drag the entire team down. So it's very important that you actually are comfortable and are able to ask questions. So these are basically the two foundational layers for psychological safety. If you don't feel you belong, and if you can't feel comfortable asking questions, you're never going to start getting into the more well-known aspects of psychological safety, which is where you start getting all that sort of creativity and goodness coming out. So that we've got our community safety. We now have our conversation safety. We move on to contribution safety, which is where everybody feels comfortable contributing to the group, and where there's enough trust that your manager will say, can you go do this? And they're not going to hover over your shoulders. Now, this can sometimes be a hard step to get, because you may have a boss who likes to micromanage. You're never going to really feel like you have contribution safety at that point in time, because you're not being trusted to contribute. You've always got somebody over your shoulders. You've always got someone who's like, let's have a meeting to review your work in the morning and in the afternoon. And you're not going to feel like you're trusted to be a contributor. And then the last phase, so you've gotten your community safety, you feel like you belong, you've got your conversation safety, you feel comfortable asking questions and learning, you've now got your contribution safety, and you feel comfortable actually doing work on your own and independently. And the last stage is commitment safety, where you feel you're committed to the team, and the team honestly is committed to you. So it's not a one-way sort of thing. And this is where you start seeing all that constructive conflict and comfort with experimentation. And you don't get punished if you try something new and you fail. Instead, everyone learns from it. And this is the magic that a lot of the psychological safety gurus talk about. This is what you want to do. This is where you want to get to, is this whole commitment safety. And here's the thing. You may hit that pinnacle, and then you may drop down again, because things happen, and you're only as safe as the least safe person in your team. So it's very possible that I'm going to use my coworker, Kara, who was supposed to be here. She had a crisis to deal with, and she's going to feel a little less safe when she gets back, because she's going to have missed things. Things may have changed, and she's going to have to climb back up that ladder, and so will the team.
All right, I've got a follow-up question for you, Deanna. How do you deal with the situation where you've got a team that already has managed to establish that sort of safety, that commitment that you mentioned earlier, which I find quite interesting, where the individual is committed to the team and vice versa. So you've got that team, and for whatever reason, there's a how do we call it? There's a shakeup, right? Someone leaves the team, someone gets fired, someone does something that's entirely unexpected. Now you end up in a situation where that trust, that commitment is, well, a bit shaky.
Yes.
What are your advice? What is your advice to deal with that?
Well, the first thing to do is be honest about it. Don't just assume that, you don't have to say anything. So say, George left the team. I know this is hard. None of us expected this. And we're going to have to either bring in someone new or shuffle the work around. And this is going to be hard and it's going to be awkward. We understand. And we understand that you're not going to be able to make your commitment possibly. So we understand we're pushing the schedule back 2 weeks to deal with all of this, which is something that's really hard to do. But ideally, you want to give people grace and the ability to regain their footing. I hate it when a team loses someone and your deadlines remain the same. And so suddenly everyone goes from being able to have a decent work-life balance to putting in 12 hours, 6 days a week because they're busting their butt to cover for somebody who left. So if you've got that room, be honest and cut them a little slack to get their feet under them again.
So I want to circle this back around because this is a security podcast after all. That's our audience. We promise them security conversations. And psychological safety definitely is a component of that. But I wonder if you could articulate that a little bit better. Like, how does it improve security culture? How does this relate to the world of security?
Oh, yeah. Well, how many times has somebody made a mistake and nobody wanted to speak up because they didn't feel safe and they were scared they were going to get punished for it? And so a hole is left open in your security because somebody wasn't comfortable enough saying, hey, I made a mistake, or worse, I found a problem, but there's such a push to get something done and out that they don't say anything because they know they'll get punished if they speak up. I actually worked one job where they would release on schedule no matter what the test team found. So you could have software that got deployed with huge gaping holes in its security, and it would get deployed because the deadline was more important than anything, and nobody spoke up because nobody felt comfortable going against the decision that this date is the end all be all. They just followed orders. In addition, one of the biggest threats any company can have is insider threats. The employee who's unhappy where they are and then starts to leak secrets either out of spite or for money or for, well, I'm sure you've talked about insider threats, so we know the reasons why most insider threats happen. You've got a couple problems here that psychological safety can help address. One, if that person actually starts feeling psychologically safe, they're going to have less reason to leak those secrets. They're not going to be angry and bitter and, okay, they may still want money, but at least you're knocking out one of the reasons. Second, if you're in a psychologically safe team, somebody on the team is hopefully going to notice that different behavior once the person becomes an insider threat. I contract for the government, so we have to take insider threat training every year. And they say, watch for the person who's working weird hours or printing out a lot of information, etc. That's great, but who do you speak it to? And are they going to come back and come after you if you say something? So there needs to be enough comfort to be able to speak up also when you see something weird happen.
Does anonymity help with that? Like being able to report stuff anonymously?
Yeah, it does, because then at least you don't have to worry about somebody coming back and punishing you. However, in some organizations, anonymous reporting, they say they take it, but they put less weight on it because they don't have anyone they can follow up with on the information. So that, they'll go to the guy who's acting weird and say, hey, somebody said you're acting weird. And they're going to say, no, I'm not. And they can't go back to the person who reported the weirdness, and so things get dropped. So does anonymity improve safety? Yeah, but does it improve security? Maybe.
That's quite interesting. How does security relate to safety?
It's very important. In fact, people like to talk about psychological safety for creativity, but it's also really important when you're dealing with a crisis. You need to be able to trust the people on your team to be able to support you and do their jobs when you're dealing with an emergency. You need to trust that the people are going to do the right thing always. So even if it's the harder way, even if it's the more painful way, you want to be able to trust the people around you to be able to do the things that are necessary to keep you safe. And if you don't trust them, the first thing you do is you start double checking on them. So that slows things down, makes them feel less safe, and they don't feel valued, which can lead to all sorts of other problems. If you don't, so you want to be able to trust everyone and have them work together. And if you do have an incident in your postmortem, you want everyone to feel safe enough to talk about what happened and really get to the root cause of the matter. You don't want to have somebody who feels uncomfortable speaking up because they're afraid they're going to be smacked down.
Yeah, of course. Makes sense. Let's change angles a bit, while still talking about the same subject. We mentioned security just a second ago, and of course, you know that modern security tools make security teams quite powerful, make IT teams quite powerful, in the sense that the security team can have near real-time logs from your computer thanks to the EDR. They can ingest the directory logs again quite in real time and know your IP address, know your location, your commuting habits. Like, security teams have actually a lot of data on their colleagues, on their coworkers, and that can breed a sort of not resentment, but distrust. In the sense that, like, why would just a random coworker, trust the security team not to do anything suspicious with my data, with the logs that they have on me? So, how do you advise security teams to deal with this inherent distrust that can arise that they can't really do much about because we can't get rid of the tools, can't we?
That is true. And let's face it, we live in a monitored world at this point in time. CCTV cameras, our phones. You want to get tracked? Every single one of us has a tracking device on us. It's called our phone. Um, so why do we feel comfortable using our phone or walking around and scratching our butt in public even when there's a camera? Honestly, we've sort of forgotten that. So there's a couple ways we can deal with it in a workplace. We can get what you want to do. First of all, be open and transparent. That's always important. If people know what you are collecting and why, they're going to feel less uncomfortable about the fact that you are doing this. They're going to know, well, you do this, this, and that, but you don't do X for whatever reason. And that's good because I don't want that kind of intrusion in my life or my work. Some of it's also going to be honestly, security needs to get audited to make sure there aren't anyone using the data for no good. You'll hear stories, this sheriff's deputy looked up the license plate of his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, and it's like, this is not good. So you should audit the security team. But again, back to that whole transparency. You should publish the results of the audit so that people know, A, that it's going on, and B, that what's been caught, so that they can feel more comfortable and see, what are you doing to address it? Because it's fine to say, oh, we found these 3 problems, and everyone's going to go, oh no, not that. How are you going to address it? You're not going to leave it open because people then feel really, really uncomfortable. Oh, I'm going to use the name George again. George over there was, taking a look and seeing how long people went to the bathroom or whatever. This is wrong. This is uncomfortable. It's like, so here's how we're going to address it, because nobody wants somebody timing their bathroom breaks.
A lot here, and I think we can talk about psychological safety for another 2-3 hours, but I did want to pick your brain a bit because you do work at a certain organization that has quite the link with the history of cybersecurity and security in general, and that is MITRE, makers of many, many, many tools and many frameworks. And I'm hoping, well, maybe we could just start there. For those that really only know MITRE for like the CVEs, because that's, they maintain the database. Maybe you could explain the mission of MITRE a little bit, like we give a chance to just have an insider conversation. Maybe how all that related and kicked you off with the psychological safety work.
Sure thing. So, MITRE, we like to say we are solving problems for a safer world. We partner with various government agencies, both on the DoD side and on the civilian side, to help them solve their problems. So we can do everything from building software for them or sitting there and offering advice and guidance, which honestly is what I tend to do a lot. We're sort of this trusted partner to help them achieve their goals. And one of the things we do is sometimes we build these tools like the attack framework or the CVEs that are then used not just by the government, but publicly available, because even though we might focus on the government focuses on the world. So if we've got a great tool that really should be used by the world, we do try and make it public. So sometimes we give it to another company who will then become the maintainers for it because we don't want to deal with it. And other times we keep them and we grow and we try and make it so that everyone can feel a little bit better about what they're doing.
Thank you for that. Because again, from the outside, MITRE, like we know it for CV, we know it for like publications, but always good to hear from someone on the inside. And we'd be remiss as a security podcast if we didn't ask you, so what's some of the terrifying things you've seen working at MITRE? Like, we don't want you to name names or get anybody in trouble, especially internationally or nation states, but you probably have seen some weird stuff.
Yes, I have. And sometimes it's innocent, and sometimes you got to scratch your head and go, huh. We had an issue of someone who decided during COVID to spend several months in Costa Rica and brought their government issued laptop with them, which is a big no. And sure enough, the government security organization realized that the IP addresses for this computer were coming from outside of the country, and they bricked it. So suddenly this person could no longer do their job because they did not have the equipment, because they had not thought that there might be a concern about working outside the country. That's, a simple one, which was innocent, not particularly malicious, but which really impacted the organization because this person happened to be a team lead.
So did that person get fired? Was there any follow-up to that?
There was a security investigation. There was an ethics investigation, and they chose to retire early.
Oh, that's quite serious. That's unfortunate, yes. Actually.
It is. And I don't know if they chose to retire early just because of this incident or if this was the final culmination of general dissatisfaction. Let's face it, COVID was hard on everyone, and there were people deciding to retire right and left or drop out and just live in their parents' basements. So I'm not going to say that the security incident is what precipitated it.
All right, then. Well then, Deanna, I know you're an engineer at heart. So let's kick off the last part of this podcast with probably my favorite question of them all. What is your favorite command line security tool?
Honestly, I am going to say my favorite command line, it's regex. I want to be able to do some serious filtering of the logs and pull out exactly what I'm looking for. It's not a custom design tool for security, but it's incredibly useful.
You're not the first guest to answer that, believe it or not.
Really?
You're not the only regex fan in the world. And I hate writing it, but I do see the raw power of it.
Why do people hate regex, honestly? It's brilliant.
It is, but it's also, if you don't have it memorized, you spend the whole time with one window with the help menu up and one menu trying to actually type in your regular expression because you don't know what you're doing.
Well, that's engineering for you, isn't it? You have the
Yes.
documentation and your IDE.
Honestly, that's me using VI. I've never managed to do anything in VI without having the help manual open.
We've got VS Code now. Well, all right then. Honestly, I definitely agree with you. The number of times where I've spent time just tweaking a regex that I've given to grep to find what I needed to find
Yeah.
is probably way too many times. All right then. What was, in your experience, the best, nicest question you've been asked in an interview, in a hiring interview?
Oh, man. Yeah. Let's just throw me the hard questions, why don't you? I'm going to say I spoke at the Society of Women Engineers, their Baltimore conference, talking about women returning to the workplace after being stay-at-home moms for several years. I did this also with my coworker Kara. She'd spent 15 years at home as a stay-at-home mom, and I'd actually been one of the people who was on the hiring team that decided to give her a chance with that 15-year gap. And I just remember women coming up to us afterwards going, I didn't think this was possible. I wanted to stay home with my kids, and I didn't feel that I could because I would, never be hireable again. And it was just incredibly empowering to be able to tell them that they can actually spend the time they want watching their children grow up and then go back to work. You may have to change what you're doing because let's face it, if you're 15 years ago, I was doing, good Lord, C and assembly, like that's done anymore. Not much, very much. So your skills are going to have to change. But anybody who thinks that a stay at home mother doesn't have important work in schools doesn't know. They negotiate every day with terrorists, otherwise 2-year-old children. They do complicated scheduling. They deal with customer meltdowns all the time. They've got security incidents when that kid learns how to open up all the cabinets. So they have really important skills that can be used in the workplace. The trick is how do you explain that to an employer? And so that was, I had several women coming up and go, well, how do I explain this gap? It's like, you need to explain the skills you got during it because these are really critical.
All right, I love that answer. I mean, that's I 100% agree with you. Like, we're moving on to the last section here. This is the fun part. It's all been fun, but the fun part that we have in every show. This is the best and the worst advice. So we'll ask you to first answer: what's the best security advice you've ever been given, or that you're hearing out there in the world? And then let us know what's the worst advice that you've ever been given that are still going around out there.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. You don't know everything. That is the best advice you have because the security world is changing constantly and you aren't going to know everything. So you need to be able to ask questions to figure out what has changed, what you need to learn, what you screwed up, because Lord knows we're human. We all screw up. Now, worst advice? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. And the the U.S. Coast Guard deals with ships from all over the world, and these ships they have to send in manifests so that they can inspect cargo and everything like that. Well, the Coast Guard gets their email through the DoD, and the DoD blocks some countries from being able to send email to them. Unfortunately, these countries do have ships that come to American ports. So they have a Gmail account for these countries that aren't allowed to email the DoD.
That's surprising, to say the least.
So, but they couldn't figure out any other way around it. And this is what they did. Happily, that machine is not connected up to their network. It is in a separate room and it's got a connection to the internet, but that's it. It's not within the firewall or anything. So they're trying to be as secure as they can. But I'm going to say my worst advice is you can't do that, which instantly means someone's going to work around it.
Yeah. Well, you have to work around it when your livelihood depends on it, don't you? So that story is awful.
Usually when I start a new company, I spend the first day just breaking the security on my laptop so I can have administrator rights. I probably shouldn't be telling you that, but that's usually what I do because I want to have that sort of control because inevitably I'm going to need it at some point in time. That was actually really cool at MITRE. I came in and they gave me admin rights to my own system. It was, wow. It's like, what am I going to do for my first day now?
Oh, I love that. But I agree. We should be able to make our machines do whatever we want them to do. They're our machines after all. So fortunately I live in a world where, well, I have a Linux box where we're doing all that stuff. My work machine, I just leave kind of alone. For the record, Kazar, because he's our head of security. I've never gone around it.
No.
So we're here at the very end of the show. So we're going to, again, put the link down below, but any other plugs you want to give besides gotps.org?
Well, I'm not sure. Obviously, gotps.org. We do have a podcast that has been on hiatus due to both medical and family dramas, but that seems to be settling down. And I have 2 more episodes that I just need to get around to editing. So look for the new episodes coming out soon. And if any of you are interested in helping the government solve difficult and interesting problems, MITRE's always hiring.
Right on. Kazar, any final words before we get out of here?
It's been a pleasure chatting with you today, Deanna. And honestly, thank you very much for the work you're doing on psychological safety. I really hope this very precious work you're doing gets more of the spotlight, honestly, because it's something that I really care about. And I also think that other security professionals should care about this as well.
Thank you. I hope so too. I would like to live in a world where we feel comfortable at work and with our teams.
What a wonderful way to go out on this episode. So thank you very much for being here. And if you like the show, everybody, like, subscribe, tell all your friends. Thanks.